Good morning, everyone. Apologies for the delay this morning, but we've got there in the end. Welcome to this public hearing regarding the proposed residential development at Thagoona. My name is Justin Begor and I'm the Manager of Development Planning here at Ipswich City Council. My team assesses development applications across the city, like the one that we're here to discuss today. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners, the Yagara, Yugara and Yugara people of the Yugara-Yagara language group, as custodians of the land and waters we share. We pay our respects to their elders past and present as the keepers of the traditions, customs, cultures, stories of proud peoples. I'd also like to acknowledge the local councillor, Councillor Martin, and Councillor Antonelli, the chair of the Infrastructure Planning and Assets Committee. Thank you for being here today. A little bit of housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, exit is through the rear door, out to the right. There's a staircase directly opposite, through the foyer and to the top of the ball. We will convene at the Darcy Doyle Place. Council officers will be here to support you through that process. There's water and coffee available just outside the door, obviously, and then further to the right, past the lifts, are the toilets. The Independent Decision Review Panel was introduced at Ipswich City Council in 2019 to ensure greater transparency and community confidence in Council's decision-making processes. Ipswich City Council, it's not a legislative process, and Ipswich City Council is the only council in Queensland that holds this process. In terms of how it operates, the panel, which comprises of a number of technical experts, convenes to review the recommendation made by council officers for a particular development application, such as the one today. The Development Decision Review Panel is not called upon for all development applications. Rather, they are called upon for sensitive development applications that are sensitive to the community and also attract a high volume of public submissions through the public notification process. The public hearing today is just one of the components of the Independent Decision Review Panel, and it's an opportunity for applicants of the development application as well as concerned community members to speak to the independent members of the panel and direct them and address them directly. The panel is not here to answer questions about the proposed development, but rather they're here to listen to your views and help inform their recommendations as part of this process. Once the hearing is completed, council officers will continue to assess the application and look to form a view on the application in the next couple of months. This will then be shared with the expert panel, who will then form their own view and recommendation. And then ultimately, those two recommendations will form a report to committee and council, whereby the Mayor and the councillors will ultimately make a decision on the proposed development. On behalf of Ipswich City Council, I do just want to thank you all for making the effort to come today. We really appreciate it. And I'll now hand over to the panel chair, Leo Mewing, who will introduce himself and also the other panel members.
Thanks, Justin. Welcome all, and thank you for attending the public hearing of the Independent Review Panel for the application at Thagoona. So my name is Leo Mewing. I'm the chair that's been appointed for this application. I'm a town planner with experience across Queensland. And you're all here because you've got an interest in the application and how that may interact with the community in which it's located. It's a healthy part of the planning process for your interests as a community to be heard and considered. As has been said, the IDRP process is for an independent review of the council's statutory assessment of the development application. And in doing so, I'm joined today by 3 additional experts that will ultimately be undertaking that independent review. Those that are appointed for this application have extensive and suitable experience in their respective fields. And by way of introduction, those panel members today are Hannah Richardson, who's here for traffic and transport, Tony McAllister, who's an expert in stormwater flooding and floodplain management, and Dr. Darren Fielder, who's an ecology expert. So today is an opportunity for each of the applicant and submitter speakers who have elected to speak to provide an overview of your views about the application for the benefit of the experts listening in today. And as you make your presentation, there's probably just a few things I encourage you to keep in mind for our benefit. First is a technical one. We need to speak into the microphone in order for the live stream to hear it. The second is the purpose really is to avail us of the information that will be helpful in our assessment. As we're independent reviewing the application material, drawing our attention to things that you want to draw our attention to, we will ultimately still be reviewing all of the material that's been made public in the application process. Please keep to the time that's been allocated to you. I intend to strictly enforce that so that it's fair and equitable across the people involved. I'll give you a warning, probably a little wave with 2 minutes to go, so that you've got an awareness of where your time's coming to. For the submitter speakers today, we'll extend it to 15 minutes because one of the submitter speakers has dropped out. Importantly, for everyone, please be respectful of everyone in the room today. You may not agree with what's being said by one or another of the speakers, but please let them speak. It's for our benefit that we get to hear what everyone gets to say. And as advised by council, this is an opportunity for you to provide your views to the panel. There won't be any questions involved in that process, so please get across what you want to get across, and we'll have the opportunity to review in detail in the fullness of time. So I will leave it there and pass over. Sorry, I did have a slide with the panel members as well, but the speakers today will be first off with Boyd Sargent on behalf of the applicant, followed by Nikki Goff, followed by Sue Dunn. So I'll ask Boyd up to speak. It's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, councillors, panel and officers and the community. Thank you for attending today and giving us also the opportunity to talk to the application which we've prepared over a number of years with a number of other experts in the development of this application. Our client has owned this property for a number of years now and has a clear intention to develop the site and develop within Ipswich, delivering a well-designed and considered development proposal for the site. I suppose it's important to deal with what the application was originally submitted as for, and that included 2 preliminary approval components for various land uses and a subdivision application. Importantly, this doesn't enable development of the site. This is purely setting up the framework for the future development applications that follow on from this overarching application. The application was lodged under the old planning scheme, and I'll use that terminology because we've got old and new now. Over time, we have a new scheme that's been adopted just recently. This was an application prepared under and submitted under the old planning scheme. We have had some regard to the new planning scheme as it is relevant to the site and issues which influence development of the site. So the site itself, as you're all aware, is at Thagoona in a strategic location in terms of its position on the state-controlled road and also adjacent to the Thagoona rail station. It's a large undeveloped property that's been used for agricultural pursuits over a number of years, and there's still cropping occurring on 3 of the properties. There's a number of houses that are also existing on that property, on those properties, sorry. So in terms of the development of the site, it's our role as the planners and the other experts that are engaged in this application to consider the planning scheme. It guides what we can do for the development, and it also sets out issues that we need to address to provide council with information on which it can decide the application. That also extends to the state referral agencies. And in terms of this site, again, the principal document that we've had regard to, in addition to the entire scheme, is the Walloon Thagoona Land Use Concept Master Plan. It's been a long-standing document in the former planning scheme, and it outlines the various land uses that are intended to occur over the site. It's also, within the words of the scheme, outlines a number of other requirements in terms of connectivity, open space, bikeways, addressing hydraulic issues, the intended form of development, the height, the density. So it's quite extensive in terms of what it outlines in guiding development of this site. So in terms of, again, how our application has adapted and addressed the planning scheme, what you can see there on the left is the master plan zoomed into our holdings. And as you can see there, the site has within it a central open space corridor in the Walloon Thagoona Land Use Concept Plan. It's identified for medium density and higher density and low density development. Reflecting that in terms of our concept is a large open space corridor, large open space areas to the north of the site, as well as identified development precincts within which the future development can occur. So again, in respect to this document and how we've adapted to respond to it, as you can see there, the development abuts and adjoins the existing residential areas to its north and south. I'll use that, it may be east and west. I'm just a bit disorientated with this and how the scheme presents itself. But with that central corridor through the site. We, from our consideration of the application and the consideration of it within its context immediately and within its broader corridor, within this western corridor, have adapted that. And that's the purpose of this preliminary approval. Adapting to reflect constraints, adapting to respect community comments that are raised through the application process, and adapting to respond to the constraints identified through our expert team assessment. So what you'll notice there in differentiation to that scheme is largely a significant area more of open space, as well as different land uses in terms of how it relates to or adjusts interfaces, abuts with existing residential areas. So you'll notice there roads, open space, or existing low density proposals to the majority of those adjoining interfaces. In terms of height, again, the development shows in the provisions of the existing planning scheme, the requirement or the ability to go to 3-storey development. That's over the bottom third of our site. What we have done is better reflect those heights across the site, what we believe are better reflection of heights across that site, and it does interrelate and react with the densities that are proposed for the development. In terms of that, what we have proposed is 3 allotments that have a maximum height of up to 5 stories. And again, this relates back to the changes that have occurred through our proposal in responding to various constraints. We've got a much smaller development footprint, and we still have to achieve various other provisions of the planning scheme, specifically as it relates to density. And the Western Growth Corridor is identified through the Walloon Thagoona Land Use Concept Plan as being a major growth corridor. That growth corridor has us up to 75 dwellings to the hectare, particularly around the train station. So our provisions here in terms of the preliminary approval seek to enable a greater height in specific locations to enable us to respond with differing housing types in those specific areas. And that's probably a fairly key point to stress here, that we have a gradation of density as we've proposed in our development from the train station out to the adjoining existing residential areas. That extra height is enabling us to have alternative measures there, alternative built form measures there that are already contemplated in terms of the 3-storey development. It's just in a much more reduced area. As I've touched on, connectivity and open space, it's a key feature of our development, and it's responding to a number of issues which I'll address shortly in some of the detailed assessments that were done over the site. But importantly, there is a central corridor through the site, much larger than what was contemplated under the existing scheme, and it connects with what we identified as broader corridors to the north of the site, as well as what we have done through our development is incorporate additional connections that we saw as important to the south, to the existing park residential development off Loader Road. So this corridor, it's largely cleared, as you saw from the original proposals. It's proposed to be largely rehabilitated to address other ecological requirements. We also have drainage requirements that are met by that corridor. But as you can see in this concept, and it's one of the plans that would be approved as part of the preliminary approval, it sets out and locks in the areas of open space and development, but it also considers the future community and providing where the local parks are and how they then relate to the future residents in that area. So what it's demonstrating there is general connectivity by future residents to future local parks and how they are able to walk to those. As I've touched on, there are a number of constraints over the land, despite it being largely cleared, and one of those is ecology, and it's one of the assessments that's also required up under the planning scheme. From the assessments that have been undertaken in terms of state mapping as well as ground truthing, what we've been able to do through the development of this site is, I would hope people can agree with, adopt that mitigation hierarchy of avoid, mitigate and offset. And through that, we've been able to retain 75% of the existing mapped vegetation. In terms of that, how that is broken down to in terms of individual communities, as you see there, 1233 RE is largely retained with a smaller proportion, although still significant retention of the RE 12910-7. In addition to that, there's, as I've mentioned, the additional 20 hectares of rehabilitation that's occurred over the site. O'Shea's Gully, a significant feature in the landscape, retained in situ. We're not touching it, it's being kept as is, except for additional rehabilitation works that may occur around that. So in terms of our corridor, it has a minimum of 140 and it goes up to 300 metres. It's being retained as is and then being planted out. We're not touching O'Shea's Gully. We don't want to impact on O'Shea's Gully. We see it's important in the landscape, but it's also important for the connections that it has with the existing vegetation. Again, some of the significant aspects of that ecological assessment identified the koala, whilst not observed on site, is recognised as occurring in that location and has been recorded as we've been identified from residents in the area on the site. In terms of that, as I've said, 75% of that vegetation is being retained for the koala in large connected open space systems that then connect further to the south. Again, I'll just use south as towards the Loader residents. What we also identified there, in addition to the vegetation communities that are present, was the Melaleuca urbiana, with a number of those stems identified. They're all being protected in open space areas. So through the retention of 75% of the existing vegetation and with an interconnected open space network that will connect this site to the west, north, top of the page, we would see that there's still the availability of this habitat with additional measures such as fencing and underpasses for wildlife to still occur on site and also move through this site. Parks, again, back to the planning scheme, we've identified as part of this, although these approvals are not being sought for approval at this stage, the delivery of the district park that the local plan requires, as well as the more local parks to cater for the residents in this future community. They're all meeting the minimum sizes in terms of local parks. Local Park 1 also is connected to a further connection to the railway, bringing it over that 0.5 of a hectare. Drainage. Now, this is one of the key issues driving the development footprint, in addition to the others that I've spoken about. And it was one that we spent a lot of time talking about with the community when we did come up to have a talk about this development. And this slide illustrates, I suppose, one of the key constraints to the land, but also presents one of the key opportunities that development of the land provides. As it's shown in terms of our concept, we have our pre-development mapping there in the centre, and as you can see, our site is largely affected by flooding, as are a lot of the residential properties in Adelong, Carrara. The residents have certainly raised that with us. Through our proposal, what is able to be achieved and proposed is a regional detention structure in our northern property, with all floods confined within our defined flood channel. What we're able to deliver through that is a flood immunity improvement to the existing residential areas. So people that were subject to flooding are now subject to less flooding or no flooding as a result of this development. Plus, again, we've taken on this more regional approach to stormwater and flooding for our site. We are considering what's happening around us. We are catering for the development around us. We are catering for our own stormwater on site. Through this, we've been able to demonstrate that we are not impacting on our neighbours, and we're not increasing flooding or flooding impacts on our neighbours. Again, the community raised a lot of issues in terms of infrastructure around the development, and it is an infrastructure poor area. I'm not disputing that at all. It is an urban expansion area, and it has services commensurate with the rural setting that it largely is. But our proposal will seek to upgrade all road frontages around the site. There's been detailed traffic impact assessments being undertaken. Those discussions with the state agencies are still ongoing. And our proposal seeks to deliver significant road improvements as overall development occurs in the site, but specifically the upgrade to Thagoona Haigslea Road and Karrabin Rosewood Road intersection. That's an intersection that's being proposed to be upgraded with stage 1 of the development. It's not necessarily related to stage 1 of the development, but it delivers an important asset to the community in that it provides a safe crossing of Karrabin Rosewood Road through signalised intersection. And again, the pedestrian and active transport components to the development are significant, and they're significant in terms of how the site sits in its landscape in terms of the future school and future commercial development to our west and the railway station to our east. We want and have tried to incorporate pedestrian and active transport routes through and around our site. As I've touched on, there has been consultation. We did come post our notification period out to Thagoona to talk to the community. We were invited by council and we took that opportunity to come out, give you all an overview of what we were proposing, listen to your comments, listen to your concerns. And from that meeting, there were changes that we adapted into our overall development. So there were adjustments in terms of height and density to boundaries. There were adjustments to open space and roads to those interface and adjoining properties. And so I believe that in terms of balancing, which is again what we need to do with this application, competing interests, I think we've been able to meet, not necessarily address all concerns. It's not our role to to do that, we would like to achieve that, but we have adapted our development from additional community consultation to the proposal now before council for its consideration. As I touched on at the start of the proposal, it's an application has been lodged under the 2006 scheme. It'll be assessed under the 2006 scheme. In terms of how that relates to the new scheme, as I've said, we've had some consideration of that, and the new scheme, rather than adopting a land use concept plan, has picked up and does have a structure plan that does not or is not dissimilar to the objectives that are being expressed in the 2006 scheme. In that this is a growth corridor for council, it is important for it to deliver density in appropriate locations. That needs to be balanced against the site constraints, particularly infrastructure delivery, open space, ecological issues, infrastructure, and importantly, the flooding aspect and hydraulics. So we believe that the proposal has balanced those competing interests, has been balanced and assessed against the planning scheme, is not inconsistent with the new planning scheme, and achieves the purpose of the overall Act for development of this site. Thank you.
Thanks, Boyd. Our next speaker is Nikki Goff.
Which one, sorry? The big one? Yeah. Yes, working. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Panel chair and members. Today I have a lot to get through, so I will be doing a bit of speed reading and speed speaking. I apologise for that in advance. Hopefully I'll get through everything that I have here. I'm a local resident in Thagoona and a local business owner. Our key point today is keep Thagoona's rural character. I've been asked to speak today on behalf of several local residents. Many have expressed their disappointment in this meeting being held during business hours when most work and are therefore unable to attend. For one resident, it is particularly disappointing that this panel review has been scheduled during standard working hours, limiting the ability of many community members to attend and voice their concerns. Make no mistake, the lack of numbers in attendance here today do not reflect the lack of concerned residents. The sheer number of submissions opposing the development is a testament to that. You could also see from the slides that Mr. Sargent had up there at the public meeting in February, there was pretty much a full house there. And that was subsequent to another public meeting prior to that, I think November the previous year, where there was equally a lot of people there. Now, from the same resident, according to the 2021 census, Thagoona has a population of 1,077 and spans 13.2 square kilometres. In comparison, the 2016 census recorded a population of 1,025, an increase that was modest and manageable. However, the growth projected under the proposed development is far more significant and raises serious concerns. With the next census due in 2026, it is alarming to consider how dramatically the population may increase and what that means for our community. From the council's perspective, Thagoona seems to be viewed merely as a suburb near a train line, an area suitable for rapid housing approvals. This perception ignores the reality that most properties here are a minimum of 1 acre, reflecting a rural lifestyle that residents have deliberately chosen to remain outside city limits. Yet the council appears intent on introducing multi-level apartment developments into our quiet rural community. My main points today are loss of amenity, wildlife and fauna preservation, traffic and road condition issues. There are, however, other highly relevant and substantial concerns detailed in properly made submissions lodged, such as flooding, drainage, and a lack of interconnectivity. I understand the other speaker today may present on some of those points, and as we learnt from the panel chair, only recently, and we only found out this morning, that one of the speakers who was to speak today, who was going to speak on flooding, drainage and connectivity issues, has unfortunately pulled out. Therefore, I don't believe that those issues will receive the proper attention that they deserve today. My first point being loss of amenity. This development does not align with the existing houses, area or landscape. You've seen this aerial view a few times already this morning. The centre of the Queensland Globe picture there does show the development land, and you can see the surrounding areas, acreage lots, more than acreage lots. Most surrounding properties to the proposed development area are at least 1 acre lots. Thagoona has much native vegetation and is mostly a rural residential area. It appears from the application documents that up to 5-storey high community titled dwellings are proposed within the area that lies 400 metres from the railway, and up to 3-storey beyond that, except for one very small area of up to 2 storeys. So this is evident from this map from the Visual Impact Assessment response. It's one of the documents online, and I think it was also similar, if not the same, as what Mr. Sargent just showed previously. The very small 2-storey area is up, when you're looking at the screen there, in the back left-hand corner, just below the 2 lots that are not part of the development properties. Similarly, Mr. Sargent has also shown you this with the density that's proposed under the current application. Based on those plans, once subdivided, there will be low density residential, 15 to 25 dwellings per hectare, low medium density residential, 30 to 50 dwellings per hectare, and medium density residential of 50 to 75 dwellings per hectare. All of this indicates 2, 3 and 5-storey dwellings which lie directly adjacent to or directly across from existing acreage properties. The scale and design of the proposed development is not compatible with the surrounding development at all. There is a huge lack of connectivity and lack of consistency with the adjoining properties. It does little protect and enhance the natural environment. It will cause visual pollution to what is currently a beautiful rural area. It will therefore impact on residential amenity, urban design and character of Thagoona, as well as compromise the amenity of existing residents. My next point is in relation to wildlife and fauna preservation. Koalas are present on the subject property, and a large portion of the subject property is core koala habitat. Sadly, there have been recent incidents of koalas killed on the road. More development, more tree clearing will only push the koalas out more, thus making them more vulnerable to being killed on roads, especially with increased traffic volume the development brings with it. Even if the existing habitat is kept, more cars means more of these endangered animals will eventually end up deceased roadkill. I'm just going to show you a few overlays in relation to the koala habitat area. So that green there shows the core koala habitat area over the development areas. This map here is the koala restoration area in yellow, and the green being the core koala habitat area still. This map here has a few different overlays. There's large areas of medium and low value bushland, and the remainder is medium value rehabilitation. Then overall, the koala district includes beyond everything you see there, but 100% of the development area. Oh, sorry. Clearing of the koala habitat has already taken place. Not many people are aware of this because it's actually not visible from most of the roads. The clearing occurred on about 19th to the 22nd of September 2022, about 15 months prior to the development application submission on the 21st of December 2023. This can only lead one to believe that the clearing was part of a strategy to maximise clearing prior to the scrutiny of the application process rather than a mere coincidence. I have some photos here to show you what the bushland there looked like in its natural form, probably for decades, but certainly for more than a decade before the clearing on lot 225 occurred. It was a lovely natural environment with natural canopy of the trees there. Then this was it after the clearing on that lot 245. Needless to say, local residents were devastated. This Queensland Globe imagery shows a comparison before the clearing, and it is very small, I apologise. The circle area is before the clearing, and this was in May 2020. The next one was after the clearing. Now, you probably can't see a great deal of difference from where you're sitting there, but if you were to zoom in on that, you could see the clearing. And bear in mind that's an aerial view too, so you're not seeing the actual amount that's cleared at the ground level due to the canopy of the trees. Residents were advised that clearing was done for bushfire, hazard reduction, weed removal, tree clearing and controlled burn. There was a letter delivered to adjoining landowners' letterboxes on a Friday. So it did not come to the attention of most of us until we returned home from work. Then the clearing commenced the Monday morning. It was about 7 a.m. from recollection. This allowed no time for concerned residents to consult with council at all. This is an excerpt from Ipswich Council's Planning Scheme Fact Sheet number 4, Vegetation Management. I've extracted clause 5 there, which I believe is the one that applies to this property. Cleared areas are provided in order to reduce bushfire risks. And when you look down A, B, C, D and E, to my knowledge, there's no building on the allotment. The lot size is 121,410 square metres. So it appears that clause 5E applies. That is, clearing must not involve the removal of native vegetation beyond 3 metres from a lot boundary. Notwithstanding all of that, on the 20th of September 2022, Council advised in writing that there are a number of different exemptions available to have undertaken this work, including the ability to do a one-off clearing of up to 500 square metres. Yet the area cleared certainly appears to be a great deal more than 500 square metres. That's the email from Council. Another interesting point regarding the alleged fire break is that if it was the real purpose of the tree clearing, then why has the grass been allowed to grow back so high that it is higher than the dividing fence? These photos show how high that grass has been allowed to grow. Interestingly, the area was slashed about 10 days prior to this hearing. Coincidence or intentional? I was present at the public meeting on 24th of February 2025, where the applicant referred to certain percentages of proposed clearing for the development, indicating it was acceptable. With all due respect, does that percentage relied upon by the applicant take into consideration the tree clearing already done? If not, then isn't that a very convenient and coincidental benefit for the applicant or an intentional plan tactic? We request acknowledgement that the clearing to date is unlawful, that the amount of clearance be formally calculated, and that this clearing is incorporated into the total figures of development, not additional. I found a new tree genus that's been added to the koala habitat definition as recently as June this year. According to the State Code 25, you can read the reference there. There's an additional genus, Blacala, in the definition of koala habitat tree under the Koala Conservation Plan. There's an extract of it there. My question therefore is, have the properties the subject of the development application been assessed to include all of the tree genera in this new definition? The next point I'd like to discuss is traffic and road condition issues. Application document 5 notes the traffic forecast is 849 vehicles per hour due to this development. This is a huge increase in traffic. It is unfeasible. The traffic is going to be high. This will cause adverse effects for the community and the surrounding residents. There is already a massive traffic congestion problem near the Amberley RAF base. Many residents in the area already travel that route daily for work. I recently had the misfortune of travelling to Umanto in that direction at about 4:30 p.m. It took me about 30 minutes backed up in traffic to get through that intersection where it intersects with the Cunningham Highway. That intersection that's meant to have been upgraded for many years and never has. And the opposite problem happens coming from the opposite direction. Imagine the chaos increase in traffic will cause with the density of living proposed for Thagoona. There is also currently congestion at the Walloon roundabout and at the Warragul Highway entrance from Walloon, both which will only be exacerbated by this development. Several traffic crashes occur at or near the Walloon roundabout. The Warragul Highway entrance is extremely chaotic. Many crossings have 4 lanes of traffic travelling at about 100 kilometres an hour with a median point that causes much confusion amongst motorists. To add to the Walloon issue, there's a pedestrian crossing about 30 metres away in one direction and a school crossing another 30 metres the other way. It is chaos, and that's without all this added traffic. In addition, there's a massive long-term flooding issues which commonly cause road closures during or following heavy rain. In particular, the end of McGeary's Road and Rosewood Thagoona Road. In turn, this causes more congestion and risk in other viable routes. Here's a list of some very serious traffic crashes that have occurred in Thagoona in recent years, just to mention some. The references are there, 1 fatality and some very serious incidents, and that's just those that have made the news. There's been several others. I myself have witnessed one. There's also a considerable risk to pedestrians. I drive these roads daily. They are not safe for pedestrians, especially at night when they walk home from the train. Some pedestrians walk from that train down to the Rosewood Green estate. Some pedestrians walk from that train down McGeary's Road. It is so dangerous, and when I get to my next slide, you'll see the states of the roads are appalling, but because of the state of those appalling roads, when you're driving that road at night and you're dodging these potholes, and then, whoa, there's a pedestrian, it is very, very dangerous. One more minute. Couple, if I may, please. Here's the current road conditions. They're appalling: dips, potholes, erosion, cavities, broken edges, etc. This is by way of example, some photos taken just yesterday. Similar, if not worse, examples can be found further on Rosewood Thagoona Road all the way to Rosewood, as well as along McGeary's Road, not to mention Adeline Avenue, although I believe there's been some improvements down that area recently. All of these roads will experience a serious increase in traffic and therefore use as a result of the development. If council cannot maintain the roads so that they are safe at the moment, then how are they going to maintain them when there's a huge increase in traffic? Conclusion. The current format of this development application is unsuitable. The proposed development does not fit with the surrounding context or support the community it does not align with the existing houses, area or landscape. I'm going to just skip to my main points because I've been given the 1 minute. There are flora and fauna concerns due to the impact the proposed development would have. There are traffic and road conditions, safety issues which must be properly addressed and properly resolved before this development. Hopefully you've had a chance to read those. Finally, I'll leave you with this, a quote from a letter of a concerned resident. Despite Thagoona's size and rural character, it remains a farming district with limited sustainable infrastructure, inadequate drainage and roads frequently damaged by large potholes. There is also a complete disregard for the local ecosystem where wildlife will be heavily impacted by unchecked development. We urge this panel to recognise Thagoona not just as a development opportunity, but as a community deserving of meaningful infrastructure investment and respect for its rural identity. Growth should be considered carefully and not imposed excessively, especially while fundamental infrastructure needs remain unmet. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nikki. And our next speaker is Sue Dunn.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair and the members of the panel, and also acknowledging our councillors in the audience. As a Western Corridor resident and a stakeholder in Thagoona, I'm appearing today to object to the development as it stands in its current form. My concerns aren't about resisting the change for its own sake, but grounded in ensuring responsible development, one that aligns with Ipswich City Council's own vision for community resilience, social cohesion and livability. Over the notification period, 189 submissions were lodged, the majority objecting, and that underscores this community concern and our level of engagement. So I'll just go through a couple of areas where outlining those objections. Firstly is a disconnection from Ipswich's planning intent. So the scheme proceeds under the previous application, under the previous planning scheme. The new planning scheme, which took effect in July 25, this framework emphasises community-led placemaking, infrastructure sequencing and resilient neighbourhood design. This proposal undermines that expectation for consistent forward-looking planning. There are traffic and infrastructure oversights. So Ipswich's new local government infrastructure plan, the LGIP 2025, ensures necessary trunk infrastructure is delivered where and when needed. Yet this application lacks evidence of required upgrades, pedestrian connectivity or emergency access planning, all critical for livability and safety. Thagoona is a semi-rural community with very limited road capacity. This development would bring significant additional traffic, yet the Transport and Access Plan gives us no assurance that this infrastructure will be delivered when needed. This is compounded by the fact that the roads are a combination of local and state-controlled roads, requiring coordination between the levels of government. Well, apologies to councils, we have little confidence the levels of government will be able to work together to coordinate and deliver when needed. There are unanswered questions. How will the increased traffic and vehicle movements be managed on the existing roads? Where's the provision for safe pedestrian or cycle access? And how will emergency services access the area during floods or peak demand? Without robust answers, giving residents confident that they will be able to be delivered, approving this development risks creating unsafe and unsustainable outcomes. There are stormwater and flood resilience failings. Thagoona and the surrounding areas are flood and stormwater affected. The developer has lodged stormwater reports, but these appear generalised and don't give residents or decision makers the confidence that downstream impacts will be safely managed. We know from history that floodwaters in Ipswich can be devastating, and a piecemeal approach is not acceptable here. Flood and stormwater management modelling must consider impacts of the wider area, not just the development as an island. The community cannot be asked to bear the risk of poor planning decisions. Mr. Sargent earlier indicated that O'Shea's Gully would not be touched as part of the development. That gully doesn't currently cope with the levels of stormwater runoff, so it's really worrying to hear that it won't be touched, given the additional stormwater runoff that will impact the site. Ipswich City Plan emphasises resilient communities, capable of handling natural hazards like flooding. Despite local flood risks, the documentation doesn't provide peer-reviewed stormwater modelling or assurance of safe downstream outcomes. And this stands at odds with Council's commitment to safe and resilient development. There's the erosion of environmental and rural character that's already been touched on. And the Council's new scheme aims to create great places by strengthening communities and protecting what we love about Ipswich, our lifestyle and our rural areas. The proposed density and housing form are out of step with Thagoona's rural context. and it's risking permanent loss of habitat and sense of place. Promises from developers to provide nature corridors have largely amounted to nothing. And I'll quote from a recent media article about one of our local wildlife carers. They say, we're leaving a wildlife corridor, then another development comes in right through that so-called corridor. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. The disconnected nature of developments through the Western Corridor will see the end of koalas in our region. I spoke many years ago with one of the former councillors for the area, and quite prophetically he said that this area will be the last bastion of koalas for the southeast region. This development would insert a higher density subdivision that's out of step with the surrounding character. Landscaping and visual screening can only do so much. The reality is that once farmland and open space and habitat are lost, they're gone forever. The development undermines community connection and cohesion. Under Council's iFuture framework, one of the core themes is safe, inclusive and creative, with key outcomes by 2026 including communities feeling they belong, high levels of civic participation, people being engaged and heard, and cultural inclusive outcomes across Ipswich. This application fails to deliver on those aims, and it lacks design features that promote pedestrian interaction, public gathering spaces or local social infrastructure. Without these, the development risks fostering isolated dormitory living rather than contributing to Ipswich's vision for cohesive and resilient neighbourhoods. And we note in the earlier slides that there was a space provided for a sporting field, like an afterthought. I'm just wondering whether developers have engaged with the local Rosewood United Football Club or Rosewood Roosters Rugby League Club and the impact that could have on them. Council's 2021 to 2026 community development strategy, structured around pillars like inclusion and connectedness, civic participation and well-being, and reinforces that objective. This proposal ignores that directive, offering no mechanism for social integration or community-led engagement. Council emphasises a collaborative do with rather than do for approach to community development, empowering groups and ensuring residents shape outcomes. Yet despite high engagement levels reflected in the objections, the developer's response has lacked meaningful adaptation based on the local feedback. In a recent ABC interview with the Minister for Environment and Tourism and Minister for Science and Innovation, Andrew Powell, he spoke about renewable energy companies that must engage with communities to bring them along with projects. The Minister stated that companies not engaging with communities will not have projects approved. This is happening at a state level. It should also happen in our local government area too. So just some alternative pathways. I respectfully ask the panel to require the following before considering recommendations. A clear alignment with the Ipswich City Plan 2025 and the LGIP 2025 rather than outdated or draft provisions. Independent peer-reviewed floodwater and stormwater assessments, which include impacts downstream with transparent findings. The inclusion of public spaces or community hubs designed in line with the Strengthening Ipswich Communities Plan. It's a catalyst project seeking multifunctional, locally responsive facilities. And I stress, locally responsive facilities. A staged infrastructure delivery model matching occupancy with service availability. A community design workshop to collaborate on housing mix, landscape design and local amenities, consistent with Council's do-with approach. In its current form, this application sidesteps Council's strategic planning directives. It risks undermining resilience, community cohesion and rural character, all while failing to deliver meaningful social connection and infrastructure sequencing. Ipswich's vision, articulated through iFuture, the Community Development Strategy and the Strengthening Ipswich Communities Plan, is for livable, connected and resilient places, designed with people in mind. This proposal doesn't meet that standard. The application is not acceptable in its current form, and I urge the panel to require substantial revisions and community collaboration. Our growing area deserves development that builds communities, not merely builds houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. So that's all of the speakers for today. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for taking the time and effort to prepare the material that you prepared to speak, and also to everyone else that attended, taking the time and effort to come along. Presumably you've all made submissions as well, and so thank you for those too. So all of that's been very valuable on my behalf for the panel. And we'll keep all of those aspects front of mind as we undertake our independent review in the fullness of time. There's probably not much more from me to say. Is there anything else for Council in terms of wrapping up? Otherwise, thank you very much for everyone for being here, and we'll see how the application progresses in the fullness of time. Thank you.